The rain came down like nails against the pavement, cold and relentless, turning the streets of Silver Pine into rivers of reflected neon and shadow. It was the kind of night that kept most people indoors, huddled near radiators with blankets and hot drinks, grateful for walls and roofs. But for Evan Hale, it was just another shift at Station 7, perched on the edge of town, where the foothills began their climb toward the Rockies. He'd been a firefighter for 11 years, long enough to know the weight of turnout gear like a second skin, long enough to read smoke the way sailors read clouds. At 34, Evan carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen enough to respect the work, but not enough to lose faith in it. His crew called him steady. His captain called him reliable. His ex-wife had called him distant, but that was 3 years and a divorce ago, and Evan had learned to live with the accuracy of it. The station smelled like coffee, diesel, and the faint metallic tang of equipment recently cleaned. Evan sat in the common room, boots unlaced, reading a dog-eared paperback he'd found in the break room months ago, and never finished. Outside, the rain hammered harder. Thunder rolled down from the mountains, low and patient. The alarm tore through the quiet at 11:47 p.m.
Structure fire 2240 Ashford Lane. Residential, possible entrapment. Dispatch crackled through the overhead speakers, clinical and urgent all at once. Evan was moving before the words finished. Boots laced, coat on, helmet grabbed from its hook. The engine roared to life and they were rolling within 90 seconds, lights cutting through the downpour, sirens swallowed by rain and distance.
Ashford Lane was a narrow street lined with aging apartment buildings, the kind with peeling paint and sagging porches, where rent was cheap and hope was cheaper. By the time they arrived, flames were already licking out of a second-story window, orange and hungry, fed by old wood and dry insulation. Smoke poured into the night, thick and black, swirling in the rain. "We've got a report of someone still inside, second floor, apartment 2C. Captain Reeves shouted over the noise, his face grim beneath his helmet. "Hale, you're with me. Parker, get a line on that window. Let's move." Evan didn't think. Thinking slowed you down, made you hesitate, and hesitation killed people. He followed Reeves up the exterior stairs, feeling the heat intensify with every step, the smoke thickening until visibility dropped to inches. The door to 2C was locked. Reeves kicked it in, and they pushed inside, crouched low, searching through the haze. The apartment was small, cluttered, suffocating. Flames crawled along the ceiling, eating through plaster and insulation. The heat was unbearable, even through his gear. Evan moved forward, sweeping his gloved hands across furniture, walls, the floor, calling out, even though he knew his voice would barely carry. Then he found her. She was slumped near the bathroom door unconscious, face pale beneath a mask of soot. Young, maybe mid-20s, slight build, dressed in pajamas. Evan checked her pulse, faint but present. He scooped her up, feeling how light she was, how fragile, and turned back toward the door just as a section of ceiling groaned and began to sag. "Hale, get out now," Reeves barked from somewhere behind him. Evan didn't answer. He ran, boots pounding, lungs burning despite the mask, the woman's weight nothing compared to the urgency screaming through his veins. He burst through the doorway just as the roof over apartment 2C collapsed inward with a roar of sparks and destruction. Outside, the rain felt like salvation. Paramedics took the woman from his arms, working quickly, professionally, hooking her up to oxygen, checking vitals, loading her into the ambulance. Evan stood there, chest heaving, watching the red lights disappear into the storm. He never learned her name. The captain said she'd been stabilized, that she'd make it. That was enough. The weeks that followed were routine. More calls, more fires, more nights spent at the station playing cards and pretending the work didn't weigh on them. Evan thought about the woman sometimes, wondered if she'd recovered fully, if she remembered anything. But he didn't follow up. That wasn't how it worked. You saved who you could, and then you moved on because if you didn't, the weight would crush you. It was a Tuesday afternoon, cold and clear, when Lena walked into Station 7. Evan was in the bay inspecting hose connections, when he heard footsteps echoing against concrete. He turned and saw her standing near the open garage door, framed by pale winter sunlight. She was tall, dark-haired, dressed in a long coat the color of charcoal, her hands tucked into her pockets. Her face was striking, sharp cheekbones, green eyes that seemed to hold something ancient and unreadable, lips pressed into a line that wasn't quite a smile. "Can I help you?" Evan asked, wiping his hands on a rag. She stepped forward, her gaze steady, unwavering. Are you Evan Hale? I am. My name is Lena Ashford. Her voice was calm, deliberate, every word chosen with care. You pulled my sister from a fire 3 weeks ago. Her name is Sophie. Recognition flickered. The apartment on Ashford Lane, the young woman in pajamas. Is she okay? She's alive because of you. Lena's eyes didn't leave his. The doctor said another minute and she wouldn't have made it. Evan nodded slowly. I'm glad she's all right. Lena took another step closer, and there was something unsettling in the intensity of her focus, something that made Evan's instincts sharpen. You saved my sister's life, she said quietly, and I don't take that lightly. It's my job. Maybe. But that doesn't change what it means to me. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that felt almost ceremonial. You saved my sister. Now I am yours. Evan blinked, caught off guard. I'm sorry, what? You heard me. Lena's expression didn't change. I owe you everything, and I intend to repay that. Look, I appreciate the gratitude, but you don't owe me anything. Really. I'm just glad she's safe. Lena smiled then, faint and enigmatic. You don't understand yet. But you will. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to him. My number. If you ever need anything at all, you call me. Before Evan could respond, she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the cold afternoon. He stood there holding the paper, feeling like he'd just been caught in the undertow of something he didn't fully comprehend. Later that night, alone in his apartment, Evan unfolded the paper and stared at the number written in neat, deliberate handwriting. He told himself he wouldn't call, that it was strange, that Lena's words felt too heavy, too weighted with meaning he couldn't decode. But he didn't throw the paper away either. Winter deepened over Silver Pine, bringing with it the kind of cold that settled into bones and stayed. Snow fell in thick, silent curtains, blanketing the town in white, muffling sound, turning the world into something soft and treacherous all at once. The mountains loomed closer in winter, their peaks jagged against pale skies, reminding everyone how small they were, how temporary. Evan didn't call Lena, not at first, but she called him. It started innocently enough. A text message thanking him again, asking if he'd received her note. Evan replied out of politeness, keeping it brief. Then another message came a few days later, asking how his week was going. He answered, still cautious, still unsure what to make of her. But Lena was persistent in a way that didn't feel aggressive, just present, like gravity, subtle but inescapable. They began talking more regularly. Texts became phone calls late at night when Evan couldn't sleep, and Lena seemed always awake. Her voice had a quality that steadied him, low and measured, thoughtful. She asked questions that made him think, about his work, about why he'd become a firefighter, about what kept him going when the job got hard. And she listened, really listened, in a way that felt rare. Evan learned pieces of her story in fragments. Lena and Sophie had grown up in Denver, raised by a single mother who died when Lena was 19, and Sophie was 12. Lena had raised her sister alone, working 2 jobs, making sure Sophie finished school, got into college, had a chance at something better. Sophie's apartment fire had been caused by faulty wiring, something the landlord had ignored despite complaints. Lena spoke about it with a controlled anger, the kind that simmered beneath calm surfaces. I almost lost her, Lena said one night, her voice quiet over the phone. And I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there. Someone would have been there, Evan replied, lying in bed staring at the ceiling. It's what we do. But it was you. A pause. That matters. Evan didn't know how to respond to that, so he changed the subject, asking about Sophie's recovery. Lena said she was doing better, back at work, trying to move forward. But there was something in Lena's tone that suggested she hadn't moved forward, that she was still standing in the wreckage of that night, trying to make sense of it. 2 weeks after their first conversation, Lena showed up at the station again. It was early evening, the sky bruised with twilight, snow falling in lazy spirals. Evan was outside clearing ice from the engine's running boards when he saw her approaching on foot, her breath misting in the cold. She wore the same long coat, a scarf wrapped around her neck, her dark hair dusted with snowflakes. You didn't call, she said, stopping a few feet away. I've been busy. Liar. But she said it without malice, almost affectionately. Evan set down the scraper and faced her. What are you doing here, Lena? I wanted to see you. She met his eyes, unflinching. Is that so strange? It's unexpected. Most good things are. She glanced toward the station. Are you off shift soon? In an hour. Then come have dinner with me. There's a diner 2 blocks from here. Nothing fancy, but the coffee's decent. Evan hesitated. Every instinct told him this was a line he shouldn't cross, that Lena's intensity was something he couldn't manage, that getting involved would complicate things in ways he wasn't prepared for. But there was something in her expression, not desperation, not manipulation, just a quiet sincerity that disarmed him. All right, he said. 1 hour. The diner was a relic from another era, all vinyl booths and formica counters, the kind of place that smelled like grease and burnt coffee and comfort. They sat across from each other in a corner booth, steam rising from their mugs, snow falling outside the fogged windows. Lena ordered soup and barely touched it. Evan ate a burger and watched her, trying to figure out what she wanted, what this was really about. You're wondering why I keep showing up, Lena said finally, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup. The thought crossed my mind. I told you already. I owe you. And I told you you don't. Lena shook her head slowly. You don't get it. When you lose someone or come close to losing them, it changes you. It makes you see things differently. You start noticing who shows up, who matters, who's willing to walk into fire for a stranger. She looked at him, her green eyes steady. You did that, and I can't just go back to my life and pretend it didn't mean something. It was one night, Evan said quietly. One call. One night that saved everything I have left. Her voice cracked just barely, and Evan saw the fissure in her composure, the grief she kept locked beneath calm surfaces. Sophie is all I have, and you gave her back to me. Evan felt something shift in his chest, a softening he couldn't name. I'm glad I was there. I am. But Lena, you can't build your life around gratitude. It's not healthy. This isn't just gratitude. She leaned forward slightly. I know it started that way, but it's become something else. I don't know what yet, but I feel it, and I think you do too. Evan wanted to deny it, but he couldn't, because she was right. There was something between them, something magnetic and confusing, born from crisis but growing into something stranger, something neither of them had asked for but both were beginning to lean into. They talked until the diner started closing, about everything and nothing, childhoods and regrets and small hopes that felt too fragile to say aloud. When they finally left, the snow had stopped, leaving the world quiet and clean. Lena walked beside him back toward the station, their breath mingling in the cold. At the corner, she stopped and turned to face him. Thank you for tonight. For what? For not pushing me away. Evan looked at her. This woman who'd walked into his life carrying a debt she refused to forget, and realized he didn't want to push her away. Not anymore. You're hard to push away. Lena smiled, a real smile this time, and it transformed her face into something luminous. Good. She reached up, kissed his cheek, quick, soft, deliberate, and then walked away into the night, leaving Evan standing there, feeling like the ground beneath him had shifted in ways he couldn't quite articulate. He didn't sleep much that night, and when he did, he dreamed of fire and snow and green eyes watching him through smoke. January came hard and unforgiving to Silverpine, bringing blizzards that shut down roads and left the town feeling even more isolated than usual. The fire station became a second home for Evan and his crew, shifts extending as weather made travel dangerous. It was during one of these long stretches that Evan realized how much he thought about Lena, how her absence felt louder than it should. They'd fallen into a rhythm over the past month. Phone calls late at night, occasional meetups at the diner, walks through snow-covered parks where their conversations meandered from profound to absurd. Lena had a way of making Evan talk about things he usually kept buried. His ex-wife, the loneliness that came with the job, the doubt that crept in after tough calls. She never judged, never offered hollow reassurances. She just listened, and somehow that was enough. But there were things Lena didn't talk about. Evan noticed the way she deflected questions about herself, about what she did for work, about her life before Sophie's fire. She'd mention fragments, jobs that didn't last, apartments in different cities, a restlessness that seemed woven into her bones, but never the full picture. It was like she was holding something back, guarding a part of herself she wasn't ready to expose. It was Sophie who finally filled in some of the blanks. Evan met her by accident, running into the sisters at a grocery store on a rare afternoon off. Sophie was shorter than Lena, softer in features, with the kind of open, expressive face that made you trust her immediately. When Lena introduced them, Sophie's eyes went wide with recognition. "You're the firefighter," she said, almost breathless. "You saved my life." "I'm glad you're doing well," Evan replied, feeling suddenly self-conscious under the weight of her gratitude. "Doing well doesn't cover it." Sophie glanced at Lena, then back to Evan. "Lena talks about you constantly. Like, constantly." "Sophie," Lena warned, her voice sharp. But Sophie just grinned. "I'm serious. It's Evan this and Evan that. I told her she should just ask you out properly instead of all this mysterious intensity she's got going on." Lena's jaw tightened. "We should go." "Wait." Sophie touched Evan's arm, her expression turning serious. "I just want to say thank you. Really. I know Lena's already said it 100 times, but I need to say it too. You didn't just save my life that night, you saved hers too. She would have fallen apart if I hadn't made it. So, thank you." Evan nodded, throat tight. "Take care of yourself, Sophie." After they left, Evan stood in the frozen foods aisle, replaying the conversation, trying to piece together what Sophie had meant. Lena would have fallen apart. It suggested a fragility beneath Lena's composed exterior, a dependence on her sister that went beyond normal sibling bonds. And it made Evan wonder what Lena had sacrificed, what she'd endured, to keep Sophie safe all these years. He called her that night. "I met Sophie today." "I know." Lena sounded tired. "She texted me the moment you left. She thinks she was being helpful." "Was she?" A long pause. "Maybe." "Lena, why didn't you tell me how hard things were before the fire?" "Because it's not your burden to carry. But you're carrying mine. That's different." "How?" Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken things. Finally, Lena spoke, her voice quieter than he'd ever heard it. "When Sophie was in the hospital unconscious, I made a promise. I told myself that if she survived, I'd find a way to repay whoever saved her. I'd dedicate myself to them the way I dedicated myself to raising her. It felt like the only thing that made sense. That's not how life works, Lena. You can't trade one obligation for another. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. But I can't shake it. And then I met you, and it stopped feeling like obligation. It started feeling like..." She trailed off. "Like what?" "Like something I chose. Like something I wanted." Evan closed his eyes, leaning back against his couch. "I don't know what to do with that." "You don't have to do anything, just don't disappear on me, okay? I'm not going anywhere." But even as he said it, Evan felt the weight of what they were building, the way it was becoming something neither of them fully understood but both were afraid to name. Love, maybe, or something adjacent to it, shaped by circumstances that shouldn't create connection but somehow had. The following week, a call came in that shook Evan in ways he hadn't expected. A car accident on the mountain pass. Multiple vehicles. Injuries reported. The crew responded, navigating icy roads in the dark, arriving to find chaos. Twisted metal, shattered glass, people crying out in pain and fear. Evan worked mechanically, helping extract victims, stabilizing injuries, doing what needed to be done. But one of the victims was a young woman, unconscious, trapped in the driver's seat, and for a moment, just a flash, Evan saw Sophie's face superimposed over hers. The memory of that apartment fire rushed back, the smoke, the heat, the weight of responsibility. He pulled her free, hands shaking, and it wasn't until they were loading her into the ambulance that he realized he'd been holding his breath. Captain Reeves noticed, pulled him aside. "You good, Hale?" "Yeah," but his voice sounded hollow, even to himself. Back at the station, Evan sat alone in the bay, staring at his hands. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind something rawer, doubt maybe, or exhaustion. He called Lena without thinking, needing to hear her voice, needing something to anchor him. She answered on the second ring. "Evan? It's late." "I know, I needed to talk." "What happened?" He told her about the call, about the woman in the car, about the sudden flood of memory and fear. Lena listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a moment before speaking. "You're allowed to be scared," she said gently. "You're allowed to feel like the weight is too much. That doesn't make you weak. It makes me human." "Exactly." A pause. "Do you want me to come over?" "It's 1 a.m. "I don't care." Evan hesitated, then gave her his address. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on his door. When he opened it, Lena stood there in sweats and a jacket, hair pulled back, face bare of makeup. She looked more real than he'd ever seen her, and somehow more beautiful for it. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi." She stepped inside, and they sat on his couch, not touching, just existing in the same space. After a while, Lena reached over and took his hand, her fingers warm and steady. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. The silence was enough, the presence enough. Two people learning to carry weight together instead of alone. When Lena finally left as dawn broke over the mountains, Evan stood at his window and watched her car disappear down the street, and he realized, with a clarity that felt both terrifying and inevitable, that he was falling in love with her. Not because she'd claimed him, not out of gratitude or obligation, but because she'd shown up over and over, in ways that mattered, and that was something worth holding on to. February arrived with a thaw, the kind of false spring that made Silver Pines residents hopeful before the inevitable return of snow. But for 2 weeks, the sun felt warm, the snow melted into rivers down steep streets, and the world seemed gentler, more forgiving. Evan and Lena had stopped pretending. They were together now, not officially labeled but undeniably connected, their lives intertwining in ways that felt natural. Lena kept clothes at his apartment. Evan had a key to hers. They cooked meals together, watched movies neither paid attention to, talked until exhaustion pulled them under. But the question neither of them had fully addressed still lingered. What were they building, and why? It came to a head on a Saturday afternoon. They'd driven up into the mountains, hiking a trail Evan knew well, the air thin and clean, pines towering around them like silent witnesses. At a clearing overlooking the valley, they stopped to rest, sitting on a flat rock warmed by sunlight. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said, her gaze distant, fixed on the horizon. "Always. Do you think people can love each other for the wrong reasons?" Evan considered the question carefully. "I think people love each other for all kinds of reasons. Some make sense, some don't. But I'm not sure there's a wrong reason if the feeling is real. Even if it started from something like guilt or obligation. Is that what you think this is?" Lena turned to look at him, her green eyes searching his face. "I don't know. I told myself I owed you something, and maybe I did at first. But now," she shook her head, "now when I'm with you, I'm not thinking about what I owe. I'm thinking about how I feel, how you make me feel. And that scares me, because I don't know if I can trust it." Evan reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Lena, you don't owe me anything, you never did. But if you're here because you want to be, because this feels right to you, not because of some promise you made to yourself, then that's all that matters. And what about you?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why are you here?" "Because I choose to be." Evan said it simply, but he meant it with every fiber of his being. "Not because you claimed me or because I saved Sophie, but because you walked into my life and somehow made it better, made me better. And that's not something I'm willing to walk away from." Lena's eyes glistened, and she blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "I'm scared I'll mess this up, that I don't know how to be with someone without making it about what I can give them, what I can do for them. Then we'll figure it out together." Evan pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "No obligations, no debts, just us, whatever that means." Lena leaned into him, her head resting against his chest, and they sat like that for a long time, the sun warm on their backs, the mountains vast and indifferent around them. It felt like a beginning finally, not born from crisis or gratitude, but from choice. 2 weeks later, Sophie visited Evan at the station. She showed up unannounced, carrying a box of pastries and wearing a sheepish grin. "I come bearing gifts," she announced, setting the box on the common room table. "What's the occasion?" Evan asked, amused. "No occasion. Just wanted to say thanks again. And also," Sophie's expression grew more serious, "I wanted to talk to you about Lena." Evan's guard went up slightly. "Is everything okay?" "More than okay, actually. She's happier than I've seen her in years, maybe ever." Sophie sat down, gesturing for Evan to join her. "Look, I know how she is. She's told you about her whole I owe you thing, right?" "She has. It's not just you. Lena does that with everyone. She takes on other people's weight because she doesn't know how to just exist without a purpose, without someone to take care of. Our mom died, and Lena became my mom, my provider, my protector, my everything, and she's never let herself be anything else." Evan absorbed this, pieces clicking into place. "So you're saying I need to be careful?" "No. Sophie shook her head firmly. I'm saying you need to help her see that she's allowed to be loved without earning it, that she doesn't have to save everyone to deserve happiness, because you're the first person who's made her believe that might be possible. I don't know if I'm the right person for that. You are. Sophie stood, squeezing his shoulder. Trust me, you already saved her once. Now you just have to help her save herself. After Sophie left, Evan sat alone, thinking about what she'd said about the responsibility of loving someone who'd spent their whole life carrying others. It felt heavy, daunting, but it also felt right. Because love wasn't about fixing people, it was about standing beside them while they fixed themselves. That night, Evan went to Lena's apartment. She opened the door wearing pajamas, hair damp from a shower, surprised but pleased to see him. This is unexpected, she said, stepping aside to let him in. I wanted to see you. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead, feeling her relax against him. And I wanted to tell you something. What? I love you. He said it plainly, without ceremony, because that's what the moment needed. Not because of Sophie, not because you think you owe me something. I love you because you're stubborn and intense and you make me think about things I'd rather ignore. I love you because you showed up, kept showing up, even when I didn't make it easy. And I love you because I choose to. Lena's breath caught, her eyes welling with tears. Evan, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. But she did say it back, her voice breaking with emotion. I love you too. So much it terrifies me. They held each other in her small apartment, the city quiet around them, and for the first time since that rainy night months ago, Evan felt like they were building something real, not born from fire or obligation, but from the simple, powerful choice to show up for each other again and again. Spring came slowly to Silverpine, the snow retreating inch by inch, revealing the brown earth beneath. The fire station stayed busy. Spring brought its own dangers, flooding and mudslides and people venturing too far into wilderness, still dangerous with melt. But Evan faced it differently now. He had something to come home to, someone who understood the weight he carried and helped him set it down. Lena had started painting again, something she'd abandoned years ago, filling her apartment with canvases of mountains and fire and abstract shapes that somehow made sense. She was learning slowly to take up